unless I've said otherwise, we don't have anything pre-scheduled as a topic today. So this will be, again, an open forum. So if you have any questions or concerns, let me know. I'm just going to send out a couple of quick notices to let people know that we're streaming, and then we're going to get started. Okay, let's see here. I don't do surveys. Not now. Let's see. Okay. Post. Okay. It's typing there. It's hard to talk and type at the same time. Let's see. Now let's get back to the broadcasting. Oh, I also want to have in my other channel. Let's close. Well, let's see my notice. Okay, no big deal. Now go over to my stream manager so I can keep an eye out. Looks like one person's viewing. So welcome, whoever you are. If you have a question or concern, please feel free to let me know. And I'll try to answer the best that I can. Again, this is the RPG College videos in the raw. What I mean by videos in the raw is I do not edit the videos. That means that when this moves over to YouTube, I will not have edited it. I don't have any editing software. I don't go through and edit it. That's not what I'm about. You get the raw video. You get all my mistakes, my side tangents, and everything comes along with it. So it's just like watching the show live. Um, I'm going to go ahead and switch on my cam view right now. We'll switch between cam view and other views. As you can see, here's my ugly face. um, let's see here. And I do want to bring up Twitch on my phone real quick, just so that if I do see anybody ask a question, I will actually see them ask the question. That's always important. Let's see, because that way I can monitor the channel. Now I want to turn off the sound on it so that I'm not hearing my voice twice. You guys aren't hearing a strange echo. But we've got the chat turned on. I can actually type your answers though, because it's a little bit easier than when I'm streaming a game to swap between windows. So I will sometimes be in this window where you can see what I'm doing here. Let me adjust that just a little bit. There. Just between windows right now. You behind me, you'll find my girlfriend's son. Don't worry about him. He's just getting something out of the refrigerator. I am streaming live, just like pandemic streaming has been for a while from home. But I always stream from home, and this happens to be where my desk is. If you would like to support my channel, you can start by helping get me some more followers. If I get 50 followers, I can go affiliate. I also need an average of 3 viewers between all the hours that I stream now. For the over 42 hours I've streamed so far, I've got an average of like 1.75 viewers right now. Shh, no talking. You talk, you go over there. Sorry about that. I'm doing 1.75 viewers over the 42 hours I've streamed so far. So I do need to get my numbers up just a little bit. So get your people in here and do that, and get some people to follow, because I do need 33 more followers in order to do the affiliate thing. And then once I'm an affiliate, you can subscribe to the channel. Now, regular subscriptions cost money to Twitch, but also if you're an Amazon Prime member, you get one free subscription every month, which you can change monthly, but you can use that to show your support to the channels that you like, and that'll help us out quite a bit. Another way you can support me and my channel is to go to my Patreon, which is at patreon.com/GamerSeuss, and there you can join one of the 2 membership levels. The lowest membership level, Tier 1, is only $5 a month, but that gets some exclusive content. The only person that gets content before them is Tier 2, the VIP level, which is $10 a month. What happens is at VIP level, if I'm working on a project, like say a book, like right now I am, as I finish chapters of the book, I will put them up on the VIP level. And then once the next chapter in that book is up, I will move the previous chapter down to the Tier 1 level for the $5 a month users. So they'll get to see it. And the Tier 2s will still get to see it. So that way it trickles down just a little bit. But I could have multiple projects going at once, so I'm only moving it once a new feature in that project is going. And it could be a project on game design, it could be a D&D module, it could be any one of a lot of things. And this is how I will trickle it down. Also, I will take some requests for things like if somebody wants a custom design of some kind, we do editing services. We will help you with little blurbs, things like that. And through my Patreon, you can get a hold of me if you have anything like that. Like if you want to see me do a specific show, for instance, on here, and you can't catch me live, you can always shoot me a message, especially if you're a patron, and I'll get that message on the Patreon, and I can work with you to possibly make it the better show because it's exactly what you want. I try to focus on all things D&D in my RPG College, which is every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Central Standard Time right now. Now on Mondays from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. and Wednesdays from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. I do what's called Nostalgia Gaming, and that's where I stream an older game off of console. Now I don't use this interface because I'm streaming directly from my PlayStation 4. But currently I'll stream Final Fantasy X or Dark Cloud 1 or 2. And I do have 10-2 to do once I finish Final Fantasy X-1. And I've never played 10-2, so but I got them in a bundle. So I'll be those are the ones that I'm currently scheduled for Nostalgia. Now, also, if I'm in the middle of doing any alpha or beta testing, I may, instead of doing the Nostalgia game stream, continue streaming that alpha or beta test if I have access at the time, because sometimes I only have limited time frames that I've got access. Gives me a couple extra hours and gets you exposure to the new game. So like for instance, today is pretty much the last day that I would have a chance to play Fractured until the next alpha test opens up. And so last night during my Nostalgia Game show, instead we played Fractured, which is a new MMO that I'm in the alpha testing phase for, and I'm now officially an alpha tester because it was open alpha test before, but I only had beta access. But now I have alpha access, and I'll be, whenever that comes up, you know, with an actual alpha test, I'll be streaming that sometimes instead of the Nostalgia Gaming. Other than that, I've got no other planned shows right now. I will try to do other shows impromptu outside of the schedule as timing allows. Like earlier today, I streamed 5 hours of Fractured till about 3:30 p.m. I was streaming Fractured today. We got up to 5 members in the channel, so it was great to see. Still no talk in the channel so far. It looks like. Let me make sure because the phone sometimes doesn't update as quickly as the chat viewer. No, it still looks like I've got one viewer. I have no idea who that is, but welcome if you are. Now, you might notice that, oh, good. I did change my category to Dungeons and Dragons, and usually that automatically activates the overlay, but it looks like it didn't automatically activate it this time, which is good because we didn't want it this time. Let's see. And here's where I could chat directly as well. And let's see, but it looks like we're streaming good. Let's see what the sound is like. And let's see, but it looks like we're streaming good. Let's see what the sound is like. And okay, yeah, it sounds real good and clear. We got a good frame rate stream going on. No hiccups. So hopefully we can get some people in here to talk. Now, as far as my pedigree for role-playing games, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons specifically since my 7th birthday when I received the white box OD&D set. That was back in 1978. So we're looking at 42 years of gaming. I'm 49 now, so that basically means 1/7 of my life I didn't game, and 6/7 I've been playing D&D, and I never go more than 6 months without playing. And right now I often play several times a week. And several times in my life I've done that. When I was a teenager in high school, I played daily for hours. We'd often lose entire weekends to Dungeons and Dragons. So, and other games too. Gamma World, Star Frontiers, um, Vampire the Masquerade, you name it, we probably played it. In the 80s especially, we played everything. If a new game came down, one of us in the group bought it. We all tried it. And we at least keep that campaign going either until we started a D&D one again or until another new game came out and we dropped it to try the new game because we were trying everything. And that kept going all the way into the 90s until Magic came out. Then it was interspersed with playing Magic cards. And we played Magic. A lot of my friends still do. I played until the price guide started coming out, and then in an Evasion block was the last I played of Magic. I still like Magic. It's just I'm not so big into the monetization of Magic. Looks like we've got 2 viewers now, so we've had a new viewer join us. Welcome. Please introduce yourself in the chat if you like. Let me know if you've got any questions or anything that you'd like to talk about today. This is an open forum on anything and everything tabletop role-playing games. I was just saying that I've got 42 years of life experience playing Dungeons and Dragons and the various other role-playing games out there. So I've got, I might get it right once in a while. I do panels at conventions like VisionCon and Gaming Arts Media Entertainment Expo, where I've talked about. I run a DM roundtable at Game every year. Last year at VisionCon, I ran a panel on writing character backstories. This year we had virtual VisionCon because of all of the COVID pandemic, and I did 2 panels there. On the first day of the convention, May 1st, I did a panel on building creative NPCs, and that was a lot of fun. And then on the last day, and I might have these reversed, I've slept since then, but I did another panel on building encounters and the CR system and the underlying concepts behind the CR system in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. A lot of mine ends up being Dungeons & Dragons. And so that's just because that's the most popular game right now in the country for role-playing games. And it's first in most countries of the world. I know in Japan it's second. In Japan, Call of Cthulhu is actually first. Actually, in Japan it's third. 5th edition is third, because 4th edition is second in Japan. Believe it or not, all those people that say 4th edition was not a good game, in Japan they still love it. but not as much as I like their Call of Cthulhu. And then one of Japan's own role-playing games is Fourth, and that is last I heard. It could have changed. It changes all the time, you know. But I love to talk about role-playing games, as my girlfriend would say. I love the sound of my own voice, but she's rolling her eyes over there. Um, So if you have a question, concern, comment, suggestion, uh, like if you want to tell me when we want to do a DM roundtable on the stream, I'd love to do that. Like I said, my normal show is from 6 to 8 on Tuesdays, but I'd love to get a roundtable together, which means more than just me talking, like where I'd maybe do a Zoom meeting of me and a few other DMs, or get a quorum if it's after the lockdown, you know, more things are open, like the game stores are open again, so I can record from the game store. I could get a quorum of DMs together and somebody monitoring the chat, and we can actually do a roundtable uh, for DMs that help both new and old, and DMs of all stripes. Like I know female gamers. I know gamers of color. I know gamers in the LBGTQ community. I know foreign language gamers, maybe. I know gamers of cyberpunk and super fantasy and sci-fi, and I know gamers of the more Dungeons and Dragons, the medieval fantasy. Um, and even gamers of like Western stuff like Boot Hill and Weird West stuff like Deadlands. So, and I've played most of these games as well. If you play Pathfinder, I don't play Pathfinder, but it's a lot like 3.5 D&D, which I did play quite extensively. I mean, I don't say I never play Pathfinder. I play Pathfinder about once a year, usually at VisionCon, when a friend of mine comes from out of town, and I'll play in his adventure, because I've been playing in his adventure pretty much for several years now. If our schedules match up, because I'm pretty busy at VisionCon, so sometimes I'm not able to make his table, but I do try, because I manage our booth for game at VisionCon, and that's of course got to be my priority. Um, but anyway, let's hear the questions and concerns. Last week we talked about. I just came with a couple of ready kind of subtopics until people came in, so we talked a little bit, rehashing about writing character backstories and a little bit on world building. So I could always continue with some of that if people would like to hear it, but I'd really like to get some feedback. I'm back down to one viewer, so I don't know. We're going to be here for another hour and 40 minutes at least. I will run over sometimes if we have a good topic going. We're not on a really strict schedule here. At some point, I'll have to grab some food, but I've got it in the crock pot cooking, so at least I don't have to jump off and cook it. Tuesday's crock pot day. Speaking of food, the shirt I'm wearing is with Chabom's Spice and Tea Shop here in Springfield. Excellent if you do like loose leaf teas, herbal teas, especially if you love chai tea. This spot, you walk into the store and immediately your senses are assaulted by the smells of teas and seasonings and spices, and it's a nice, welcoming, warm, aromatic smell. It's not overwhelming or overpowering in a negative sense, but more like you feel like you just walked into like a bakery and you're smelling fresh bread or something. This is the kind of smell that says, "Ah, you're home," and you want to dig into something tasty or have a nice warm cup of chai tea, or if you're into it, a cold cup of tea. I'm not into cold tea. I think it should only be ever drunk hot. But those of you who are into it, they will serve you a hot or cold cup of tea there, usually for a couple bucks. So you can try them before you buy them, and then they'll give you the tea bag that they made it, because that's usually good for one more cup, and they'll give that to you in a Ziploc baggie so you can make another cup at home later on. Um, a lot of times when they don't have the pandemic measures up, they'll also have like a thermos thing set up, not a thermos, but a little dispenser thing, and they'll have the tea of the day or one or two teas of the day that you can try out already prepared, so you can just pump them into one of the Dixie cups, and those are free, you know, a little free sample. But in addition to teas, they have a wonderful array of spices, ground, whole, um, freeze dried. I mean, every kind of spice, and they have spice blends. I use them extensively. The pork ribs that I'm cooking slow cooked into the crock pot right now, um, I put them over a bed of onions. Then I put the pork ribs down and put some red bell peppers over the top. Then I covered it with green salsa and a little bit of barbecue sauce. But then I've got garlic powder, and I've got parsley and basil and oregano, and a little bit of the taco type seasoning, and freeze dried ginger, flaky freeze dried ginger. Because if you're like me, you sometimes you buy a bulb of ginger, it goes in the refrigerator, it gets forgotten about, and gets buried and goes bad. And unfortunately, I hate to do that. Love great ginger, but it's not in every single recipe, so I often forget it, and then it gets buried somewhere. I have a really tiny refrigerator, and it's overstuffed right now, and it's been overstuffed for a while. Sorry, my back itches a little bit. Uh, and So you get the freeze dried flake ginger, and it'll kind of rehydrate and aromatically scent and flavor your food if you use it that way. And so I buy that. We just bought some fresh this last Saturday at Jabam's when we had our Saturday outing. So when I go out, kind of stretch my legs, we do hit a couple of shops or the store to do our grocery shopping for the week on Saturdays after my D&D game. And this time we went to Jabam's, which we hadn't been to in a while, and we got quite a refill of a lot of our seasonings that we'd been running out of because of not coming there in several months. We do buy some seasoning in bulk. I'm not saying we don't go and get like salt and pepper and basil and parsley, dried basil, dried parsley, or taco seasoning over at Sam's Club. That's easier to get that way. But the majority of our spice cabinet and our all of our teas, except for the K cups, come from Shabam's, and we have about 20, 22 varieties of teas. We got K cups too, of course, and we've got a Keurig we picked up, and we're not really coffee drinkers. The girlfriend will sometimes drink a cup of decaf, but we don't really drink coffee, but we drink tea. And so we love our tea shops, and a lot of my friends, a lot of nerds out there I know are fellow tea files, tea aficionados, like a good tea party. I mean, what better than a steampunk uh, cosplay tea party? I mean, they're great, right? So anyway, get your friends over here. Let them know. I posted on Facebook on my channel, but please feel free to share my link if you're listening. I would love to see some more viewers in here and get some questions going. I kind of want to start talking about some topics, but I really the only benefit this is really going to go. I mean, I've got one viewer. It says, but I don't know how much they're actually viewing and how much I'm white noise in the background, which I've done on Twitch and YouTube channels before too. So it's nothing wrong with that. But I would like to see this go to some good and not have to repeat myself. Now, it will eventually make it over to YouTube where people can watch it over and over again and actually dig for the information themselves, rewatch it, and go over stuff they might have missed. But this is your chance for you to air and get your questions answered. I'm not part of like the D&D design team, but I have read the design notes. I did play in the playtest, and I have been playing longer than a lot of the people on the design team have and longer than some of them have even been alive. um, but definitely longer than most of them been gaming. And so I've got a trick or two. I'm not saying I'm perfect. By no means. My opinion and my way of gaming is not going to be yours necessarily. I'm just here to give you tips, tricks, advice that I've gleaned over the 42 years of playing with the various types of players I've come across and the various types of DMs that I've played under. I've played with Keith Baker, who is probably best known for inventing the Eberron campaign setting for Dungeons and Dragons back during 3rd edition. Is when he won the campaign setting, design contest, and he pretty much he's been game designing and stuff for a while and everything, but this is where he came to real notoriety as the Eberron campaign designer, and of course then he made a version of it for 4th edition and now 5th. So it's still going strong, and that's a much more steampunky type of D&D setting. It's really not the setting I typically play in. I usually do homebrew or Forgotten Realms myself, but nothing against Keith. And he's a wonderful DM. I've learned so much just playing in a couple of games with him. I haven't had a chance to really play a whole lot. He's also had some other games come out, so and I've helped play test, beta test those too. We have a few of his other games here. Um, he was the lead designer on Cthulhu Flux. So love Call of Cthulhu, and he likes Call of Cthulhu, and so he helped design the Flux expansion for Call of Cthulhu. He of course makes one of my favorite card games of all time, Gloom, which is got these special transparent cards that you can play, and you're trying to kill off your characters while keeping everybody else's characters alive. Totally different from most other games. It's really a twist on its side, an obtuse way of looking at the world, and it's really great. And so he designed that just to give you an idea of some of what Keith Baker has come up with. Looks like we've got another viewer there, a little bit of a runny nose. Welcome to the channel. If you got any questions or concerns, we haven't come up with a topic as of yet. We're still waiting for viewers to come in, kind of. The show is still early. This is really only the second real episode of the RPG College on a scheduled time frame. Otherwise, I've run RPG College before, but those were always with topics pre-selected, and they weren't on a scheduled Twitch time. I just ran them when I felt like it. So it's usually late at night, and I might get 1 or 2 viewers in there, but otherwise I just talk on my subject and just keep talking until it was done, and then you could rewatch it on video through YouTube, where I move it usually within 10 days of twitching it. Sometimes I get it up sooner, but usually about 10 days. I'm a little behind in my YouTube transfer, so I'll probably do a bunch of them this weekend or this week during the week, maybe Thursday. Once I set them to transfer, the computer does the work. I just have to set them to transfer, and then I have to go in and approve them on YouTube. But that's also where I get to sort them into the YouTube playlist. So, and I'm a completely new Twitch streamer and YouTube streamer, really. I mean, I've had my YouTube account for a long time because it's attached to your Google account. So as long as you've had a Google account, you pretty much had a YouTube account. But I never really used it for streaming myself. Twitch is brand new. I started in April during the pandemic, and I've really only started like scheduled Twitch broadcasts in the last couple of weeks. And I now have a Patreon for people who do want to support my Twitch streaming. Looks like we lost that second viewer. I guess I bored them, or they decided that this wasn't for them. Maybe they're just bouncing from channel to channel, see what's going on. They don't want to suggest a topic. They just want to jump in if there's a good one and learn. And I understand that. I mean, and it's nice if I can come in and have set topics available. I mean, I've got my station all set up to go into D&D Beyond if we need to. You can see here we could We could switch. Oh, somebody's messaging. Um, and oh, they've got one of my Twitch channels is getting ready to broadcast at about 9 p.m. Just letting me know. Anyway, I was looking to see if it had anything to do with this. I where was I? I was talking about. Okay, I do have the Patreon that you can support. Go as it says at the bottom of my screen. Go to Patreon or YouTube and search GamerSues, or just patreon.com/GamerSues. YouTube's not that easy. It's not just youtube.com or .tv/GamerSues. You actually go there, type in the name GamerSues. Otherwise, you got to use one of those long um, redirect kind of URLs for like the individual videos and such, which I don't like to put because I think they change them for after a while or whatever, and they're not indicative of what the link actually links to. So it's better just go to YouTube, type in GamerSues, and look up my profile, and then you can see what kind of content I've got there for you. You'll see my RPG colleges. You'll see me streaming Final Fantasy X and Fractured, and a little bit of Dark Cloud. I even have a small segment there about board and card games that is going to be on Left Wing Studios with Lurch and Angel. I won't always be the one doing the segments for them. Sometimes I'll be like Greg Pullman, who also does a show on board card and role-playing games. He's also the director of the tabletop gaming area for the Gaming Arts Media Entertainment Expo, a position I used to hold. I'm now cross promotions director there, so I'm still on the board. It's just for a couple of years there, I went blind. I was almost completely blind for 2 years. Made it really hard to run the gaming area. But I've had corrections since. But other people have taken over the gaming area. They've built on what I added to it, and I'm very proud of them. It's a wonderful run convention, in my opinion. You definitely should go if you're in the Springfield area. We were looking at doing it in August this year, but of course, we did just recently cancel it for the pandemic. Although we're looking to do something online, we have not officially announced what yet, but we are looking to have some kind of online presence this year to make up for not having the live convention. And we will be having it next year. We're just waiting to lock down our dates. But we are looking to have it next year. If you're a game fan, definitely go there. Oh, I was going to show you that I had my D&D Beyond set up and ready to go, so that we could swap over, put me up in the corner, and bring D&D Beyond out here. I've got it in the main screen, so if we wanted to zoom around D&D Beyond a little bit, if you got any questions about the D&D Beyond program, I am by no means an expert on D&D Beyond. I do use it for DMing and gaming. I keep all my characters on it, but that doesn't mean I know every feature, and I don't go through all of their tabs all the time. But I can use it to illustrate some of my points, to look up information directly from the source books. I've got the 3 core books plus Xanathars and Volos and a couple other books already loaded here. I'm on my membership, so I have access to their full details. In fact, I personally don't own the Sword Coast Guide or Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, but I've got secondhand access to those from people that are in campaigns with me. They're sharing campaigns, so I can even give you information from those too. All completely legal. I do not believe in illegally pirating any gaming PDFs and such. Once they go open source, it's fine. Then you can get to them. Till they're open source, you really need to pay the developer, because they spend a lot of money and time developing these games. And people often wonder why their prices are going up. Things, and part of the reason prices go up is because people are out there pirating and that makes it harder for them to make a dollar and produce the games and feed their families. And as we all know, especially during the pandemic time, feeding our families has been kind of rough for several people. Um, okay, we're about 35 minutes into the stream, and we still haven't come up with a topic yet. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the subtopic of world building right now. I've not prepared a topic. We're completely, like I said, video in a raw. Uh, I wasn't ready for this topic because but then I'm always kind of sort of ready for everything. But I don't have like a Google Doc or anything like I usually do. But when you're world building, there's a lot of things you need to consider. And we talked a little bit about this last week. First off, there's two main ways to build. There are multiple ways, but two main ways to build your world. You can go from outside in, so the broad spectrum, into the finite, or you can go the other way around and go from the inside out. Start with the village or town that the party is going to base out of and do most of their beginning adventures, and slowly build the areas around them as they're going to start encountering them. So you're not giving yourself more work than you have to do until you have to do it. But you have to worry because players will go in the direction that they decide to go. You don't want to railroad them, but that means that you might want them to go left and they're going to go up and right instead, and you're not ready for that at all. So you do have to have in the back of your mind what you're going to do if they do go outside of the boundaries of what you've already designed. Are you going to do some stall tactics? Are you going to make stuff up on the spot and jot down notes during the session so that you can formalize them into your game world building later on? Are you going to, what are you going to do to handle those situations? Are you going to completely build your world almost to, every detail that you want before you start running the game? That could take a while. That's not usually what I recommend. I mean, it's great to have a good bit of framework up and have a bunch of notes and stuff, but you can over prepare, and sometimes you get a little hide bear when you do that. What I mean by hide bear is that once you over prepare and you put something down in writing and it's on your game world, and then something happens in the game that would change the game world because it's a dynamic game and what your characters do matter, you don't want to change it because you've already written it down. It's already in your game journal. It's already done. And so it becomes harder and harder for you to dislodge. You get a little stubborn, and we all have that stubborn streak in us. DMs especially think of the world as their creation. It's their character, just as the player characters are the player's creation. And so you have to keep that under consideration because you got to remember it is the player's story. Um, Within your world, within the framework of your world, you are sharing a story building experience. And so you do have to be willing to be fluid and dynamic with your world. And so those two different methods can lend themselves to very different gaming experiences. We're going to start by talking about the macro version, where you start big and work in small. And usually the first thing you think of in the macro version of game design is building your campaign's deity system. You might even go so far as to start off with coming up with a couple of creation myths for your characters, the origin stories, as it were, of your gods. If you ever read classic Greek or Egyptian mythology, Celtic mythology, they have origin stories, but they're not called origin stories. That's a term used by comic books. Stop that, Patrick. I don't need to hear the jingle jangle. I said stop, not go slow. Sorry. The 14-year-old was wanting to play with a cat, and it was distracting me from my broadcast. Yeah, because the a lot of times when I broadcast on Tuesdays, they're out doing stuff, but with COVID and everything, they're not comfortable to go out too long and in public. They're not going to go to like a movie or anything. I mean, I'd give them money to go to the movie. They'd have money to go to the movie. They don't even need to get it from me, but I'd give them money to go to a movie or something if they wanted to. But we don't feel comfortable in a movie theater right now because of that. So, but that's okay.
I don't need your stinking money.
She does need my stinky money, she says.
Just, that amount that you gotta give me every month.
So $24. Got it.
240.
uh, but anyway. So in the macro view, you are creating the mythologies, the origin myths of your game. So if you were going to start out, you would start like, say you were building a game based on the Greek mythology, just especially since a new book just came out that was loosely based on the Greco-Roman history, but it is regards to sets of magic in the Magic Planescape campaign world, where the Planeswalker, not Planescape, but Planeswalker campaign world of Magic the Gathering that has, recently been introduced to Dungeons and Dragons through Ravnica and others. Well, they just came out with a new Thalos book. I think it's called Thalos. And that book details like a lot of the Greco-Roman gods and stuff is their origin, because that's what the world in that part of Magic the Gathering is based around. And so if you were going to set out and do your own Greco-Roman type of world, you would start with your origin story. And so you would have the Titans. Or you might even start even before that. You might start with Gaia. And Gaia's had different names depending on different mythologies. But you're basically going to start with the spirit of the earth and the spirit of the sky. And the spirit of the earth and the spirit of the sky are going to come together, using whatever name. I'm going to try to use as few actual names as possible so that I leave it freed for your interpretation. But the spirit of earth and the spirit of sky come together, and they birth the first beings. And the first beings are the elder gods, or in Greek mythology, they were called the Titans. They're still not using specific names. They were just the Titans, which really means mighty giants. They were giants and like giant immortal beings of sheer power and destruction. And the king of the giants, the king of the Titans, was the Titan in charge of one of the most powerful forces, time, known as Chronos. Because all of time was under sway, both the past, present, and the future. I say both, but it's really all, because it encompasses all of these things. And Chronos was the Titan of the overseer of the past, the present, and the future, and he's this big, overwhelming godhead figure in the elder gods or the Titans. But he hears a prophecy that says that one of his kids will overthrow him and take his place, will sit upon his throne. Well, he is a jealous, greedy god who doesn't want to give up his throne. And so, as his wife births each of their children, he eats them. And his wife, fearing that all of her children will be eaten and then she will have no offspring, because they always push in these mythologies, the origin stories, the maternal instinct of the females of the gods. This motherly instinct was to protect her children. So when her youngest child was born, which for the sake of the Greek gods was Jupiter, or the Roman name, the Roman name was Jupiter, the Greek name was Zeus, was born, instead of feeding him to her husband, she wrapped a bunch of rocks in the baby blanket and fed that to the husband instead. And then Zeus went free and eventually conquered Kronos and set his brothers and sisters free from the body of Kronos, and dropped Kronos and the rest of the Titans in a place called Tartarus. And Tartarus is one of the layers of what we would call hell, but it's the underworld. We even get the name for hell it's not from Christianity, but the name for hell is from the name, one of the names given to the god that was given to the underworld, because Hades, or hell, is the brother of Zeus that was given to control, because Zeus really had two brothers, and then they had a bunch of kids that populated all the gods. The main brothers of Zeus were Poseidon and Hades, and they, once they were splitting up the world after Kronos was gone, they often it's said that they had a dice game or some game of chance, and Zeus became the thunderbolt. He was the lord of the sky and the storms and the thunder, and he was the father of all the gods. Even though he's brother to these two gods and son to the overgod, he is the father of all the gods. And there's, we're building an origin story. Like I said, I'm using comic book terminology, that origin story thing. And the gods then built from there. Then he goes and he built the portfolio. Poseidon gets control of the oceans, because of course the earth is 2/3 water. And even back in the times of the ancient Greeks, they knew that water was a major component in everything. Water was believed to be life, and it was in everything, and it really is kind of life. And so, if Zeus was the father of the overworld and the land, then Poseidon got the sea. He got the next best thing, and then Hades was left with the underworld, the depressing, dark place where the dead go to meet their judgment. And so Hades was a little pissed at his throne, because he just didn't feel quite as high and mighty. He felt exiled from the gods, even though he had a throne on Olympus, which was the great mountain where they had the gods met and they discussed things, and all gods have a throne on Olympus. Zeus being the highest of all. Poseidon was not Poseidon, but Hades was rarely seen on there, because he felt like an outcast sent to the realms of Hades in order to run the underworld. And so he would judge, and he'd often judge harshly of the dead as pettiness for his own outcastness, his own being kicked to the side, kicked to the curb by his brothers. What was that? Banishment. Good word. His own banishment. Although he wasn't technically banished, he could, but he felt like he'd been banished. He'd been relegated. That's a better word. Relegated to the underworld, and so that's the start of the origin story for the Greek gods. And that's an example of the macro view of your gaming world. You start by developing your gaming gods. In the Forgotten Realms, you got a lot of different gods, and several of them are borrowed from other gods. Like Ares, the god of war, is the archetype that's is another name for Ares is Mars, or it's even the word Tyr has been used for Ares. And in D&D, they use Tyr as their god of war, but it really comes from the Greco-Roman god Ares, and Tyr is also from a couple other mythologies, but they bring him in as the god of war in the Forgotten Realms. A lot of the Forgotten Realms gods are at least partially based on other god systems, because you borrow, pick, and choose, because you want your gods to cover the basic portfolios that the gods were covering in the Greek gods, the Celtic gods, the Egyptian gods. You know that you need a god of nature, and you need a god of the sun, and you need a god of the waves and stuff. And so you to make sure you fill all those slots, you kind of bring up one of the other god systems and stuff, and start making new names for the people in those different things, or even borrowing directly, but maybe just making a slight change or something. Ares might become Aris, Aris, or something like that, and then suddenly, boom, he's your new god of war. Modify it a little bit further. Take Ares and Mars and combine them together, call them Maris. Then spell it exotically, Marys, Maris, god of war. That's a creative way to do it. And when you're world building, you are the god of your world. You're the overgod. You're the overarching architect of the world. and you come up with these little tricks and tips. Like I created a world, and I decided that I was going to have 6 gods. Each one was going to have 3 faces, so a total be 18 aspects. The gods would represent the 4 primal elements: air, earth, fire, and water, as well as life and death. That's the 6 primal forces. But when I went to name my gods, I went into a digital translator program, and I'd put in earth, and then I'd go through a few different languages till I found a version of earth that I liked. And then I'd put fire in, and then I'd look, and I don't remember what all my gods' names were, because I haven't used that god system in a little while. I do have a document somewhere, but I don't feel like digging it out. It is in my Google Docs somewhere, but it's so far back I'd take forever to dig for it. But that's how I created my gods and gave them names. And then the 3 aspects: one was good, one was evil, and one was neutral, which is based on the alignment. One axis of the alignment, the good and evil axis. There's also, because Gary Gygax, who created Dungeons and Dragons, was a big fan of Michael Moorcock, who wrote the Eternal Champion novels that included Stormbringer and Hawkmoon and Elric of Melniboné. And in those books, instead of worrying about whether people were good or evil, they worried about if they championed the world of law or chaos. So when Gary Gygax was setting up Dungeons and Dragons, he figured his alignment system would have a dual axis system. So it not only would have a slider between good and evil, but you would have a slider between law and chaos. And combining them together would make your alignment. And that's where the origin of alignment comes from. So if you were chaotic on the lawful chaotic spectrum, and then you were good on the good evil spectrum, you would be called chaotic good, because they always said the law chaos spectrum first. But if you were like neutral by all sections, they would just say you're pure neutral or true neutral. So that way they got the 9 alignments. It looked like a tic-tac-toe board. And you could see pretty much what alignments were completely contrary to each other by going diagonally across the board. So of course chaotic evil went against lawful good, and lawful evil went against chaotic good. Neutral good and neutral evil were against each other, because they only cared about pure evil or pure goodness, and they don't care about law or chaos. They're neutral as far as law and chaos was concerned. And that's why they came up with the axis, and that's why there's alignments on all character sheets of D&D. The focus on alignment after fourth editions, where they started to lighten the focus on alignments. They got rid of a couple of the alignments, and they simplified it. They kept lawful good and chaotic evil, but otherwise they basically had neutral, good and good evil, lawful good and chaotic evil, and that was pretty much it. And it was just more of a guideline, because modern gamers had decided that they would rather see players play into their characters' personalities than through some kind of alignment. And they recognize that especially humans, which are players, are on the spectrum. They're always sliding back and forth on the spectrum. They don't have a true seat on that alignment wheel. They're very situational individuals. In some cases, someone could be very, very lawful and organized, and they have to do things exactly the way. Their bookshelf is in alphabetical order, and then the books in those alphabetical order are also then arranged by size and color and topic and this and that and the other. And then they make the Dewey Decimal System look chaotic, because this is like ultimate order. But if you walked into their bedroom, it would look like a cyclone hit it, because they're not very organized with anything else. But their bookshelf's pristine. Or like one of my favorite examples is a chef. You go into a chef, and if chef gets to run his kitchen the way he wants, everything is put in its place. Pots are hanging from the hooks on the walls. Cutting boards are in just the right places, stacked in just the right way. All the ingredients are put in the right places, in the right refrigerators. They got several refrigerators for different things. They got one just for produce. They got one for meats. They have a dry aged shelf for dry aged meats. You know, they have these different things. But that person outside of the kitchen could be the biggest slob you've ever seen. No comments from the peanut gallery over there. I'm not a very organized person, but I'm a bit of a chef, so I can be a prima donna in my kitchen sometimes. And right now I'm stuck living in a tiny trailer. I'm broadcasting from kitchen, and I'm not showing you, I'm not turning this cam on the rest of my kitchen because ain't no way you want to see it. Uh, and ain't no way we want to show it. My girlfriend is shaking her head. She definitely agrees with that. So maybe once we get our house, which we're hoping to get, we're going to make our kitchen the way we really want it, because we both have aspirations for our kitchen. Then I might even do a couple of cooking shows on Twitch. You never know. Now, we pretty much know I'll probably do a cooking show on Twitch. Might even bring the 14-year-old. By then he'll be at least 15, probably 30 by the time we get a house. But he'll probably even jump in and do some cooking with us. Looks like we're back up to 2 viewers. I don't know when that happened, but welcome. We are just doing a general discussion today. There's no topic of note, but any topic can be brought up. This is the RPG College, so we do ask that the topics be related to role-playing games. But the little side topic I had gone on, and then we went on a tangent. That's part of the video and the raw part of my RPG College, is I will go on tangents, and that doesn't get edited out later. But our side topic was world building. And then we got to talking about macro view of world building, where you started with the gods of your world and worked downward into the finite. And then I went over kind of how the Greek gods were laid out, their origin story or myth. Origin story, of course, is a term used in comic books. But I started with that, and then I was talking about the alignment tree in Dungeons & Dragons, and then I went on a tangent about its origin. And I was talking about how humans aren't a set alignment because we're a little bit of everything, and we slide up and down around that scale. So, and that's what got me into organization. And then an example of organization was a person who might be really, really lawful in the kitchen, like a chef, but they're also an absolute slob, like their bedroom. They don't pick up, they don't make their beds. They're, you know, there could be the complete thing, but like a person is like a professional at work, their office space at work is pristine. Everything, stapler has to be at exactly the right angle on their desk. All their, their calendar has to be on the right date. All their notes, all their pencils got to face the right direction. Their screen has to be at exactly this tilt and everything. But at home, they're like, I don't care. They have a bunch of beanbag chairs. They just slump down on them, and they're good. It looks like we're up to 3 viewers now for this episode. That's actually our current record for this episode. Not for the day. I did stream some Fraction earlier today, and I got up to 5, maybe even 7. If I think I remember 7 either yesterday or today as well. So I'm always glad to see more viewers. We're open right now. It's an open forum. So if you got any questions or concerns about your games as a player or a DM, go ahead and ask them, and I'll try to address them. To reiterate my pedigree, I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons and games like this for 42 years. So I might have something right in my bag of tricks. But then again, everything is situational and opinionated. So what I think is right or correct for my game is not necessarily going to be correct for your game. So don't go to your DM and say, Doc said this, you must do it this way. He probably should, but don't go telling him that. Said, don't go to your DM and tell him, Doc said this way, you must do it. Yeah, but he probably should, but don't tell him that. No, that's not how it works. My opinion of how to run my game is not the same as Matt Mercer's opinion on how to run a game, or Keith Baker's opinion on how to run a game, or Satine Phoenix's opinion on how to run a game, or Liam O'Brien's way to run a game. Everybody runs their games differently. I think I'm in agreement with a lot of them. Like I said, I've gamed with Keith Baker, and I've talked with Satine Phoenix, and I've watched Liam O'Brien and Matt Mercer DM on several occasions. Not that I'm saying I'm up to the actual thespian chops of someone like Matt Mercer. Um, I am a bit of a voice actor, but I'm not a professional voice actor.
Yeah, you're a bit of a ham.
I'm a bit of a ham, as my girlfriend just yelled across the room. I don't know what she means. Is she calling me a porker? I don't know. But no, I'm a bit of a ham. I admit I love the spotlight. I love the sound of my own voice. Other DMs are a little bit more quiet, a little reserved. They kind of hide behind their DM shield. I even roll my attack dice right in front of people. I prefer to do that so that nobody can say I'm cheating when I roll 5 20s in a row, and they've seen me do it. With their dice, they've seen me do it. So it's not even weighted dice. I'm like kind of a different version of Will Wheaton. You know how Will Wheaton always jokes that he can never roll above like a 5 on his D20? Yeah, when I'm a DM, it doesn't seem like I can ever roll below a 15 on my D20 sometimes. And I'm often rolling those 20s and multiples in a row and massacring parties that I don't even mean to massacre yet. Your opinion may vary whether I mean to do it or not. Then my players think that I'm doing it because I do. I get into the role of a DM. And that's a good side tangent to go into while we don't have a topic. One of the most misused quotes in D&D that's been thrown out there throughout the years is it is not the DM's job to kill the players, and that's the direct quote, and that's right. And I'm not sure who said it first. Gygax has probably repeated it more than once, but with a chuckle in his throat when he did so. Arneson may have said it more often to Gygax when Gygax wanted to go overboard. But the actual way it should be read, in my opinion, this is opinionated, is it is not the DM's job to kill the characters. It is, however, the DM's job to present situations in which the characters may die. And here's the distinction here. The DM is not a malicious figure who's trying to play against the players. That's not his job. He's not there to kill the characters. That's not what he's trying to do. He is, however, trying to create an exciting, edge of your seat situation that's memorable, that's dramatic, that's pulse pounding. And that means there must be the threat of death for the characters because the threat of loss makes life more meaningful. That's why all of these danger seekers out there go skydiving and bungee jumping and all these other extreme sports guys and snowboarding and airboarding and stuff. They're doing it for that adrenaline rush and that thrill and that chance to defy death. And you want to do that even in your role-playing games. You want to defy death. You want to show death the finger and tell him, you can't get me. And then he's going to stomp at you and prove that he can. But so you have to provide situations. If it looks like the DM is always treating you with kid gloves, you're never going to die. Or worse, you get into all of these really big, intense moments, and at the last moment, he pulls you out and you never suffer any consequences. Both of those situations really make a major letdown on the drama of the situation. Any good writer will tell you, and I'm a bit of a writer. My girlfriend's a writer, English major. I mean, she's definitely into writing. Will tell you that drama drives a story. Conflict and drama is what drives a story. You want good characterization, sure. You want good background and description and setting and word use. Those are the technical parts. But what drives a person forward to turn that page and read the rest of the story is the drama, the uncertainty. The uncertainty. That's the same reason people like to do puzzles and the same reason they like to watch shows like The Masked Singer. It's just a catchy little musical show, just showing off some musical talent. It's another one of those talent reality shows. But it's got that element of surprise in it because it's got a mask. You don't know who they are, so you're doing a whodunit. You're guessing. There's no risk involved except for bragging rights, but you've got that risk, that element of surprise. Okay, now the masked bandit just came into my kitchen. He's trying on his new mask, I guess. Everybody's doing the mask fashion show lately, and I'm not even talking about Jim Carrey's The Mask, which would be much more amusing to me. But no, because of this whole coronavirus thing, everybody's got to wear these masks, and I can't wear a mask that covers my mouth and nose. I can't. I've got a claustrophobic response. Within 10 or 15 minutes, I'll be freaking out. So I can't do it. And I have to do dialysis 3 days a week. So they want me to wear some kind of mask. I had to come up with a clear face shield, a little bit more like a welder's hood thing that's clear. It's open in the bottom and everything, and it's clear, and it goes over my face in such a way to where I don't feel something pressing on my mouth and my nose, and it keeps me from freaking out. But it still allows me to go to dialysis to get my treatment because I've got kidney failure. I need that treatment. But that's not about role-playing games. We don't really care about that. I care about it because I got to deal with it 3 days a week, but you guys don't care about it. But yeah, you as a DM, it is your job, and that goes into the world building thing. You're supposed to present these situations that try the characters, that makes them have to work at it, that makes them have to push or come up with alternative solutions to get around overwhelming odds. They have to decide sometimes, is the next battle worth the battle, or do you run away? There's no shame in running away sometimes. In fact, you're intended to run away sometimes. It is not something where every single encounter should be beatable. A big misconception that started in 3rd edition when they came out with the challenge rating system for D&D, because before, Gygax and Arneson never had a challenge rating system. They didn't necessarily worry about the balancing of an encounter. They had a very loose system. They said the level of a creature was how many hit dice it had. But its hit dice types could be different hit dice types, just like the players could. And their actual power could be in all kinds of other factors in the monster, not just their hit die type. If they have a lot of really kick-ass abilities but low hit points, that doesn't make them any less of a challenge to your character. So, but they didn't really worry so much about balancing encounters. Gary Gygax thought nothing at all about taking a party of 5 first level adventurers and sending them against an adult black dragon. He would do it. He had done it. I've heard stories of those campaigns, and they're still talked about by the players with excitement and joy and horror and everything, and it had nothing to do with balance at all. In fact, the older editions of D&D had no concern for linear balance. You were not balanced across the levels. If you started as a fighter and a wizard, the fighter was definitely the one that had more power, because the fighter could swing his sword at full strength all day long without worry. The fighter got the best con mod, best hit point modifier, and he had nothing that was on any kind of time delay. He could do that sword swing every day and just hope for the crit. And everything was describing what he did, but that was it. Where the wizard, he had that powerful magic spell that he could do. One spell once a day. That was it. Didn't have cantrips. He had a die 4 hit dice. At most, he could get 1, maybe 2 hit points from Constitution. So the absolute maximum that a wizard could have in hit points was 6. But most of the time, they were running with 1 to 4 hit points, because you rolled even the first level hit points in the older editions. You rolled it. You didn't start with a maximum. So that means a common house cat could knock down a wizard. And he had his 1 spell, and that spell was good till the next day. It wasn't good till they had a chance to rest. It wasn't good till, you couldn't do these like break it up with long rests and stuff. They usually had to pick like a time of day to get their spells back. And then if they miss that time of day, they have to wait till the next time of day. So if you got your spells back at dawn, and that really started in 2nd edition. Before that, it was a little bit more obscure. But like, say, if you chose that you got your spells back at dawn, then dawn was the day, was when you got them. But you had to have a full night's rest, be relaxed. There was all these rules on how long it took to memorize each spell. So you might have this much extra time in the morning that the party had to wait while you were refreshing your spells, and stuff. So your little glass cannon wizard might have a great spell or two in their book, but they only got to use it once or twice in the first few levels. Then later on, as the levels progress, when he got past the threshold levels, about 7 or 8, the whole thing changed. You know, especially right about 5th level. First off, the wizard started getting 3rd level spells, and those were the ones that you hear stories about. Because 3rd level is when you get the Holy Grail Trinity of spells. You get Fireball, which is the spell for direct damage. It's the one that everybody talks about. You get Lightning Bolt, which is the alternate big, bad, massive damage spell. And then you get Fly, and Fly lets you go anywhere and everywhere you want to go. Those 3 spells were the triumvirate of spells. If you talk about a wizard doing massive wizardly things, it was things like flying under his own power, shooting big massive balls of fire, or big bolts of lightning that arc from one person to another. Those were the stories that when you read a fantasy novel, those are the part you ate up when it was a wizard. And so once you hit 5th level as a wizard, you could start doing those. And you could do 1 initially, but then later on you could do more. And so about 7th level, you had this experience of what was called the linear fighter, the quadratic wizard. LFQW was the abbreviation. Now, wizards were called magic users back then, but they still call it LFQW because they knew they were wizards. The linear fighter just stayed pretty much linear progression. He got his hit points. He may have done a little bit more damage. He's looking for new magic items because it's the only way he can really improve his hits after a while. He's a little bit better at 2 hits. He's a little bit better at taking hits and saving throws from damage. But that's about it. That's the fighter's progression. But he's being very linear. He's only, progressing in small little steps. And that's it. The wizard was doing quadratic steps. It was like exponential growth. So a 2nd level wizard was not 100% twice as powerful wizard, but pretty close. But a 3rd level wizard was almost twice as powerful as a 2nd level wizard. And a 4th level wizard was almost twice as powerful as a 3rd level wizard. And so on. So they had a quadratic progression going on. You got more and more powerful as the wizard got older and older in the game sense of experience. And so they didn't worry about balance across levels. They worried about balance across the lifetime of the character. They said, oh, that's balanced because the fighter can excel in the beginning levels, and then the wizard, when the end levels, can really show his stuff if he manages to survive to get to those levels. But if he manages to survive to get those levels, then he is large and in charge, and the fighter is his scroll caddy. He's walking around saying, yes, what scroll can I get you now, sir? Because he's next to useless and the wizard's taking care of everything. And if the wizard can't take it on, you're dead, So that was the concept of balance back in the day. Then 3rd edition came along. And 3rd edition started trying to balance all the classes. It started to. It hadn't quite got it completely into balance yet because they wanted to keep and maintain the uniqueness of each class. And that's an honorable goal and everything, but they were working more towards things. They started to introduce 0 level spells later on called cantrips or orisons. Orisons for pre-spells, cantrips for arcane spells. But they started doing those kind of things. They started giving the cleric something other than healing to do. Because a lot of times you felt like if you were the cleric in the older editions, all you were was a mobile hospital unit. And if you took any spell other than a healing spell, they would shout you down because you were a blasphemer to your god because you're not healing the party when they need you to. And that might not be why you wanted to play a cleric. You might have wanted to play a god-worshipping guy. Never healed nobody. Was a selfish bastard. But you don't worship a selfish god. He's a selfish bastard. And he wanted to do other things with his magic. He wanted to summon great holy warriors to fight in his stead, and enchanted weapons and all these kind of things. But your party say, no, get another healing spell. And 3rd edition started to make it to where you could as a life cleric, for instance, if you were a good cleric, you could, any spell slot you had could be replaced with Cure Light Wounds, so you didn't have to prep Cure Light Wounds. You could prep all your other spells, and Cure Light Wounds were always in your back pocket. You could replace any spell with Cure Light Wounds. So that was, or you could replace any spell with the Cure version, for instance. Because back then, the Cure Wound spell was not the building spell that it is now. We had a whole bunch of versions of spells by level. That's something new in 5th edition that they changed. Now, that started in 3rd edition, and then they introduced the challenge rating system for the monsters. And they wouldn't evaluated each monster based on its overall threat, based against a party of 3 to 5 adventurers. And its overall threat then made its challenge rating. So whatever its CR is what level average party he can take on. So if the party is average level 5, then a CR 5 single monster should be able to take him on. It's not 100% correct, but it was a loose start to the challenge rating system. Then 4th edition came on, and 4th edition, gotta say, when it come to balance, 4th was the god of balance, because everybody was built on the same framework, which this pissed a lot of people off, because they thought that they neutered Dungeons and Dragons. They made it to where it just wasn't what it was always meant to be, and what they'd always loved about it. The sameness of it was violating the separateness of the classes, even though through reflavoring you could make every one of the class. It's the flavor that made the classes different, not the underlying mechanics. You really want the underlying mechanics to be similar. I mean, different but similar, so that it feels like you're playing different characters, but it feels like you're playing on the same battlefield, like you're playing the same game, not everybody playing a separate game. And that's really what 4th edition came in and did. So they totally rebalanced the characters, put every character on the same framework. Everybody started with 2 at-will spells, or cantrips, or cantrip-like abilities. These are the abilities you could do all day long. You can spam them, like swing your sword, stab with your knife, whatever. This was everybody had a couple of them, so they had choices. In addition to that, you had 1 encounter power at the very beginning. That was something that you can do, and then it would take a short rest, which is like a 5 to 15 minute rest, depending on your DM, and it would give you back your encounter powers. So they were good for once per encounter, but then you had to at least rest, go with just a little tiny bit of downtime before you got it back. And then everybody got 1 daily power. And that daily power was good once a day. And once you used it, you had to do a long rest before you could reset that daily power. That was it. And everybody had one. The fighter had a daily power. The rogue had a daily power. That's when they changed the name from thief to rogue, to avoid that stigma that, oh, well, thieves are people that steal things, so they're automatically evil. And first thing you should do is steal from the party because they're thieves. And we wanted to move away from that archetype, so they changed the name to Rogue, because it could represent a whole plethora of storybook archetypes, everything from the dex-based fighter, because that's what the Rogue really was. You didn't take fighter class if you wanted to be dex-based. You took Rogue, because the roguish one was the musketeer. The fighter was the knight, or the barbarian berserker guy. If you didn't have barbarians. If you had barbarians, then the barbarian was that guy. But the fighter was the one that wore the heavy armor and carried the big-ass axe, or the big-ass shield, and the big-ass sword, and strode into battle and stuff. But your dex fighter, the one that used precision and dexterity, not strength as his prime requisite, that was your rogue fighter. And so they brought in the rogue. And anyway, and then they balanced all these things out. And then in 4th edition, because it's the 3rd edition that they made those changes. In 4th edition, they put everybody on the same framework. Now, they also took the monsters and again evaluated them by challenge rating, but this time they did not evaluate them as this monster is a challenge for 3 to 5 players. No, they went, this monster is this much challenge for 1 player of this level. So they went to an equal footing. So a CR1 monster was equivalent to a CR1 player as an equal challenge. That way, if you had a different size party on either side of the scale, you could still balance out your encounters if you wanted to. And it's really for people who are focused on balance, this is the better way to go. But you always have to keep the underlying assumptions going when you're doing these kind of CR systems too. Because the underlying assumptions, and they change from editions, because the underlying assumption in 3rd edition and in 5th edition was that you were going to have X number of encounters in the day, and that you were going to have 3 to 5 adventures in your party. And in 4th edition, yes, he's still assuming that you're going to have X number of encounters in the day, but you're not basing it on 3 to 5 members of the party. You can have any number of members in your party. That way you could build a little bit more finite, fine-tune it. Not only that, but they went and took the classic roles that had always existed in D&D, but had not always been named, but had been named in a lot of their following games, like MMOs, computer games. They took the roles, the tank, the buffer, the mobility DPS guy, and they took those roles, which are based on the 4 original classes of D&D. Your tank, or defender is what they called it in D&D, was your fighter. And so fighters and paladins were defenders. And they try to make defenders of every power source type. Fighter was your martial defender, where paladin was your divine defender. But you had defenders, and then they came up with some other classes to represent the others, like the nature defender. There was a different one, and that was a sentinel, and the sonic defender, which is a battle master, or psychic battle master. They had different names for them to represent those elements, because they also went and kind of broke things down by different power sources. So it's a different way of looking at things. And then they had your strikers, which were your DPS and mobility guys. Strikers had always been rogues, and rangers are more of a striker than they are a defender. So they were moved solidly into the striker range. Now, most characters could back up a different role, but they had one that they were really built towards, and another they could kind of be built towards. So they had a primary and a secondary role. But the 4 roles were defender, striker, leader, and controller. And defender were based on fighters from the original editions. Strikers were based on thieves, the original rogues from original edition. Leaders were your buffers, your people that led by charisma and used enhancements to buff the party and debuff the enemy. So they were your buffer debuffers. So they were your enchanters, and they were your healers. And of course, that was always the clerics. So that was the cleric's classic role. And then there was your controllers. And controller meant battlefield control. They were the ones that did the big blasty spells like Fireball and Lightning Bolt to get rid of a whole bunch of crowd control. Or they're the ones that use magic to take over the mind of another and make him fight for you, and that was another type of control. And they were the ones that almost all of their abilities slung conditions on people. They didn't do as much actual damage all the time, but they would do it to a lot of people, or they would include a bunch of riders to the damage, like this does this damage and also slows everybody 10 feet. This does this damage and makes everybody fight at disadvantage, although they didn't have what's called disadvantage or advantage in 4th edition. But it would say that's what you got. You had a minus. Everybody got a minus because they got hit by this guy's attack. Or this attack made everybody automatically focus on this person. Like the defender's main focus ability that made them a defender is they could take aggro. That's what they had in MMOs. So that's kind of what they had the ability to do in D&D then, is they took aggro. And that sounds like, oh no, they're turning D&D into a video game. No, they're not. The video game came from D&D in the first place. All they're doing is recognizing the role of the character and giving them some tools to facilitate their role, because your fighter was the person who was supposed to hold the line, protect the wizard and protect the cleric while they're casting spells and stuff in the back. If the cleric's your healer and not your tank, because the paladin was another type of cleric, really, because the cleric could wear full armor just like anybody else in the older editions. So clerics didn't have to hide behind the fighters really. But your fighter's job, unlike the cleric, was to actually stand in front of everybody and take the hits, while the weaker glass cannon types like the wizards and stuff were protected, and they had to have something to make the enemies want to attack them instead of bypass them and go after your weaker links. And so they had the ability called the mark, which is basically, I get aggro on you. If you attack anybody else but me, something bad happens to you. And that's my mark. The fighters had that. The paladins had the divine challenge. And, each different defender had a different variation that was thematic to their energy type to that. And then the controllers, like I said, were the ones that did a lot of special effects. They cast darkness on the area so everybody can't see. They cast gaseous cloud to attack a whole group of people. They cast fireball. They put invisibility on other people to help them, which is kind of like seconding the leader role. Because like I said, everybody had at least one other role that they could kind of sub into a little bit or build towards. You could build your wizard to be more of a buffer leader type. You could build your cleric to be more of a fighter frontline type. And depending on the cleric's god you took, you could build him in a lot of different ways. But that's the roles they did. But then they took those roles that they gave to the players and they slightly changed them and also gave the roles to the monsters. That's the other thing they did with the balance in 4th edition is they gave roles to the monsters. So instead of you coming against 5 goblins, oh wow, 5 cookie cutter goblins. So every one of them's got a scimitar and every one of them's got a short bow, and they've all got about 7 hit points. And we know this because they're a goblin. Goblins are the same here, there, and everywhere, right? We know this. They might have fewer or more hit points, but that's about it. One of them might have a mace instead of a sword, but otherwise they're about the same. But in 4th edition, they gave different goblins of different roles, and almost every monster had variation ones to fit other roles. So there would be a goblin trapper who was more like the ranger, who was good at setting traps. He was good at sneaking and skulking around people, but not nearly as good as the goblin skulker, who was much more the rogue. So where the trapper was more like the ranger, the skulker was more like a rogue, because there was a slightly different roles for the monsters. The monsters had soldier. Soldiers were a lot like defenders, but soldiers really worked good in units together too. That was one of their things. So, like for instance, hobgoblins often had soldiers. There were kobolds called dragon knights because the kobolds kind of worship dragons, and they were the soldiers of the kobold world. Little tiny dog men with scales, depending on what version of the kobold description you use, but they were masters of like working together in tandem, attacking, and they were soldiers. So soldiers had good hit points and usually good armor class, but also hit for good damage and worked together in synergy with others, like using the pack tactics that you see with a lot of the smaller creatures or wolves and kobolds and goblins and stuff that we'll sometimes have. They work well together. If you had a Dragon Knight on either side of you, they were both more effective because of the other one's existence and where they were in relation to each other. So that was the soldier role. Then there was the brute. The brute wasn't nearly as organized as soldier. Where the soldier was the centurion of Roman legion type, who was very militaristically trained or instinctively knew how to work with his pack to gang up on people and stuff. The brute was just your ogre. He was the guy with the big club and lots of muscles, and if you hurt him, he might notice it, he might not. But he will hurt you back. And he was the Hulk. He was like Hulk smash, brute, and he had massive amounts of damage he could do, and he could massive amounts of damage he could soak, and that was his thing. And he was closer to the defender than the soldier in some respects because he was about soaking up and taking up hits, where the soldier was not just that; he's about strategy. Then you had your skulker. You had your
controller, and anybody could be a subclass controller. And you had artillery. These were your missile weapon guys. So like where your ranger might have your bow, or your wizard or your warlock might shoot spells at a distance more as a DPS guy. This is one of the versions of DPS. This was your DPS guy that mainly stayed at a distance to do his damage. This was your archers. These were your artillery pieces. These are your gunners in military parlance. Was your artillery. Um, as they would say, artillery is a tank battalion. These are those guys. These are the ones that could attack you from a distance and then throw the brutes and the soldiers between you and them to protect them. So they were like, some of your casters were in your party side, some of your casters were kind of the artillery. And on the monster side, some of the monsters were artillery. So you could build a coherent group of monsters to attack your party. So instead of like 5 generic goblins, you got 5 goblin guards, 1 goblin warrior, a goblin artillery, and maybe a goblin a priest of Melgubliate, who basically was their leader, who did all the buffing and the healing and stuff of the party, and inspiring them to go to war and making them attack more fiercely there. And that was the thing. So that was these roles, and that was all part of this big balance thing. So that's what it started. This diatribe was the balance, and balance was ultimate in 4th edition. There was still some things in 4th that they did wrong. Not going to say that 4th was the perfect edition. It's one of my favorites. It's probably my favorite edition, which will make some people immediately discredit me. But I love 4th edition because it answered a lot of the complaints we'd had throughout the years. You had more starting hit points at the beginning, so you didn't die from somebody hiccuping on you. A house cat did not kill the wizard. Not in one punch anyway. Even with a crit, it took 2 punches. So that means that everybody had a chance to at least get 1 hit in unless they got gang rushed, and that happens too. But that at least the DM has a little bit more control of without having to fudge dice rolls. And that was the big balance thing. And now 5th edition comes out. Now 4th edition was maligned for its homogeny, its milquetoast kind of attitude of making everybody feel too much the same. That was the big complaint about 4th edition. That, and because they labeled all the different abilities as powers, a lot of people would scream, "It's a superhero game now," instead of being D&D. And it's super heroic because the cinematic scale of 4th edition was meant to be more epic than some other editions. You were meant to really progress and grow and fight. They didn't have the bounded accuracy. They had a little bit more bounded accuracy than 3rd edition, but not as much bounded accuracy as 5th edition. 5th edition scaled everything back. 5th edition comes up. They're new Johnny on the spot. First off, they come up with a D&D Next playtest. Got all the people in the community involved. That was great, so they could get feedback. Their promise, which they didn't completely deliver on, was that people who played any of the other editions could basically simulate the same game in 5th edition with little to no changes, really, just by picking different options from the books. And that works for most of the editions. It doesn't really work as much for a 4th edition player, but it does work for most of the editions. You can make 5th edition simulate all the other editions fairly well. And it did take some from 4th edition, changed it a little bit. Like in 4th edition, everybody had a one-shot healing power they could do as an encounter power. So they could do it once per short rest, called Second Wind, and it took an action. Unless you were a dwarf, then you could do it in a minor action. Because back then they had a move, minor, and a standard action in the 4th edition. In 5th edition came out, you had action, bonus action, and move. Slightly the same, except the bonus action, unlike the minor action you could do just about any time if you had something with a minor action ability. Bonus actions are a little bit more strict than that because bonus actions usually require some other condition to be fulfilled to allow you to do. There's some exceptions, but like for instance, if you're a fighter and you want to do an offhand attack, you must have used your main attack first to get that offhand attack as a bonus action. Otherwise, the offhand attack is just a regular action. It's just you're using that other hand to do it. But if you want to use it as a bonus action, you first must have used an attack action with the main hand. That's a requirement in order to open up the ability of the bonus action. Then there's some bonus action, like some spells had bonus action as their casting cost. But then this had a reverse cost in that if you cast a bonus action spell in a round, you can't cast any other spell in that same round unless it meets two criteria. First, it has to have a casting time of 1 action. And second, it has to be a cantrip. So no leveled spells. So if you had a cantrip reaction and you wanted to react to something on your turn and you'd already cast a bonus action spell, you could not do it because you could not cast another spell on your turn. That's okay. Most of the time your reactions happen on other people's turns when the bonus action's ability will have worn off, or its restriction would have worn off. But that's the thing, is that's kind of the limiter on bonus actions. Bonus actions required another action usually to open up the bonus action. And every once in a while a DM could be convinced to do an action not in the book and say, oh, it only costs a bonus action to do. That's fine. That's the freedom of having a DM, and the joy of a role-playing game is the DM gets to add these case-by-case situational things in. Okay, so 5th edition comes up and it's slightly adjusted the action economy. That's that. And then the let's see, I'm trying to go. Okay, then they do what's called bounded accuracy. Bounded accuracy meant they don't want the numbers to climb and climb and climb ad infinitum into the stars, because like in 3rd edition you could end up with plus 20, plus 40 to hit somebody once you get to a high enough level. And you know, it can get pretty ridiculous after that, but everybody's going up. So if you're 30th level and they're 30th level, then you should be at about an equal keel. And a lot of people didn't necessarily like that either, although that is the nature of the level-based system. Older foes that used to be tough become easy. Tougher foes become, you know, on par with you, and so on. But you grow to scale and they grow to scale. So you start sending tougher challenges against the party. So the party, you always want them to go against kind of even. And that was the thing that started this whole subplot of what we're talking about. Well, they did bounded accuracy in 5th edition, and they started out by saying no ability score without the use of magic could ever go above 20. That made it to where the absolute best ability score bonus that you could get on anything was plus 5 for a single ability. A couple things allowed you to use multiple abilities, but for the most part you had to use one ability on it, and it was maxed out at plus 5 without magic. You could get like a girdle of Storm Giant Strength or Gauntlets of Ogre Power, and you could go past 20 with those. But normally you could not go past 20 on something without magical help. So that was one way of bounding accuracy. Another thing they did about to even out the balance and bounded accuracy is they made it to where every character's main attacks were based on their prime requisite ability. Wizard, whose main attacks were spells, did not use dex to hit with their spells, and they didn't always rely on saving throws on their spells. Instead, if they had to make an attack roll with their spells, the wizard would use intelligence to guide their spell. The cleric would use wisdom to guide their spell. The warlock or the sorcerer would use charisma to guide their spell. So there was no more having to necessarily split your real focus and your ability scores so much into 2 and 3 different avenues in order to totally make your character well-rounded in the ability to use their class abilities. Their class abilities were all tied into 1 or 2 ability scores. Everybody didn't have to have either strength or dex good in order to be any good in combat. Everybody still wanted to have a high constitution because that's hit points. But that's beside the point. But your dump stat thing was a little bit more available to you, so you could play those interesting characters with like an 8 or even a 6 or something in that dump stat, and you can make them a very, very quirky part of your character because they balanced everything out with the bounded accuracy. The other thing they did with bounded accuracy is they made a proficiency bonus based on character level, not class level. So it didn't matter which classes you picked. That didn't change your basic attack bonus, or BAB as they called it in 3rd edition and Pathfinder. They instead, for depending on what level you were as a total for the character, gave your proficiency bonus. And then if you were proficient in the weapon, you got to add that bonus to the attack. Not to the damage, but to the attack. Again, bounded accuracy. So characters of a given tier could be expected to hit with this much more accuracy. So now you've bounded their stat to no more than +5 and their proficiency to, at most, I think at the highest level it goes to plus maybe 6. I think at the absolute top tier it's 6. I'm not looking directly at the... Hey, that's one of the things where we can use the D&D Beyond. See, what we'll do is bring up my D&D Beyond screen, and we're going to go into our game rules, and we're going to go into let's see, let's go to sources. Where's sources? Sources. Let's go to the player handbook, because that's where you're going to find the source. And beyond first level is where you'll have the level chart. And there we go. And there's the proficiency bonuses. And you see that starting at 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 17th level, they have a +6. That means that right now with just your ability score and your proficiency bonus, the max bonus to hit that you could have is +11 without any other factors involved like magic. Now bring in magic. Magic's part of the bounded accuracy too. First, they took magic out of the automatic assumption for the challenge ratings of the game. 4th edition baked it directly in. You were expected to have this level of magic when you were this level of a character. So magic lost its ability as much to be a game changer. Magic is supposed to make you fight above your weight class. That's its whole purpose. That's what's magical about it. Well, in this, the magic bounded accuracy used to be all magic items maxed out at +5. Now that doesn't seem to be a lot, but they actually tamped them down to no more than +3 and put more of a focus on special, flavorful utility powers of the magic to make the items more interesting. But the most powerful plus a magic item could get would now be +3. That means that your 20th level fighter with 20 in strength and a +6 proficiency bonus only would have a +3 for their magic sword. That means that a +14 is about the best they're going to turn up with. You know, that means that an average roll of 10 is going to hit AC 24. Pretty high, right? And you can actually get to AC 24 even in the lower tiers. So it's bounded that accuracy up. And then the other thing they got rid of was all the ancillary bonuses out there. They kept a couple. Cover, partial cover or low cover was +2, and 3/4 cover or full cover was +5. They kept those 2 pluses. But all these ancillary pluses they got rid of. Instead, they introduced what's called the advantage disadvantage system. And it's a binary toggle. As in, if you have advantage and something gives you disadvantage, then you're attacking normal. And at that point, you can't add advantage or disadvantage again. It won't matter because it doesn't keep going back and forth. It's either you have advantage, you don't have advantage, or you have disadvantage. 3 possibilities. And real quickly, if you have both advantage and disadvantage, or you have neither advantage or disadvantage, you're fighting normal. And then otherwise, if you just have advantage, then you have advantage. If you just have disadvantage, you have disadvantage. And all that means is whenever you have advantage or disadvantage, you roll 2d20s for your roll. And if you're on advantage, you take the high roll. And if you're at disadvantage, you take the low roll. really simple bounded accuracy. You're not making 500 math problems in your head, which to some, especially the old school gamers, they thought anything that lessens the math of it makes it less of the game, because that used to be one of the gatekeeping things about Dungeons and Dragons. It was a nerd game. People who played it were physicists and programmers and mathematicians and nerds who could do complex calculus in their head and stuff. And it helped them improve their math skills because they were figuring out charts like the THACO table, which was counterintuitive. And they were figuring out charts like the saving throw table, which was a table because you couldn't just do a formula to get your saving throws. Nowadays, the saving throws are directly based on your stats. But back then, they were based on a table, and they had oddball saving throws. They had petrification, polymorph, spell. Nowadays you save as a strength save, you save as a charisma save. It's a little bit more simplified, and that simplification turned off some of the newer players. But as you can see, that's where the bounded accuracy came in. So 5th edition relies on bounded accuracy to level out the playing field. But that whole concept of balance that started with the CR system made it to where all players thought that any encounter they came across, the DM had to have made it balanced so that they could defeat the monster, that they could beat up the monster and win. This is not true. They could beat up the monsters and win, but because every encounter is possible if ungodly good luck comes out. But some encounters are never meant to be beaten. In older editions of the Dungeon Master's Guide, I don't think it's in the 5th edition guide directly, but we can check because we have the source here. Let's go back up to the top. Let's go to the next chapter. It's an easier way to get up to the top. Go to the source, and we want to go to the Dungeon Master Guide. Tiers of play, mapping your creating a multiverse, creating adventures, between adventures, treasures. So it's probably creating encounters. Here we go. In creating encounters, let's see if it has the breakdown. I don't believe this one specifically has the breakdown that has showed up in many DMGs. It does have the experience point threshold for building encounters. This is kind of based on the 3rd and 4th edition way of building them. And these are challenge ratings and stuff. Evaluate encounter difficulty, determine your thresholds, then ways to modify it from monsters, multiple monsters, multiple players, less players, compares, party size, multiple party encounters, building encounters on a budget. They set your encounters to a daily budget. What your adventuring day was, and this is your experience for a day per character when you're budgeting. So that kind of helped you. The short rest and modifying encounter difficulty things, fun combat, random encounters. Yeah, no, they don't include the chart that you saw in older edition DMG. I rarely look at the DMGs anymore because I've been playing so long. DMG is more of the advisory book for new DMs. I mean, it's great. It does have some technical knowledge like these charts, but it's not needed for everybody. You can play the entire game with a player handbook and a monster manual. Even if you're a new DM, you could, but it's a little bit easier with the DMG for building your own stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. The DMG is just more information for DMs, and that's really what it is. It's always kind of been almost an optional book, not a required book. Although they did used to put all the magic items in it. So the DMs bought that one to get the magic items. Now they put the magic items in a few different places, and that changes things. Although they did move them back to the DMG for the most part in 5th edition, and then new books come out with new items. They're not in the player handbook anymore, except for like basic healing potions and stuff. But it used to be the encounter breakdown, and the one I use is from 3rd and 4th edition, and I don't remember which book it was first in. It might have even been in an earlier book before the challenge rating system came out, but then it was more of a judgment call thing, because I think the second edition had a variation of it on there in there too. But it broke down your encounter data. 5% of your encounters were supposed to be easy encounters. That's 1 out of 20 encounters, 5%. And that basically in the challenge rating systems means of a challenge rating lower than the party average by any amount. Lower by 1, lower by 5. It's easy to negligible. And what it in real life means is it uses about 10%, say, or less of your resources. And some books will say 20% or less. And some, it just kind of depends on the edition. But I say about 10% or less of resources could be burned up by that easy encounter. And by using the resource thing, you can bring in non-combat encounters, because an encounter of a social nature can still use up a resource. So it still counts as an encounter. Anytime an encounter has the potential to use up resources that are limited, then it counts as an encounter for your encounter day budget. So now it starts to look like, hey, your 6 to 8 encounters in a day that the 5th edition challenge rating system is based upon makes more sense if you're counting non-combat encounters in that 6 to 8 encounters a day. Although actually with non-combat encounters, I will often push it to up to 13 or 14 encounters in a day. But that's because the 6 to 8 is based on medium and hard encounters only. It's not taking into account either the deadly or the easy encounters, which will modify those numbers. That single scout is an easy encounter. You may not use any resource to really beat him up. You just beat him up. Or he might nick you for 1 or 2 hit points, and then you've used a little tiny bit of a resource. Or he might call and facilitate the next encounter happening sooner, which in a way uses up resources. Because now you haven't got as much time to prepare, and you possibly are going to lose more resources repelling that second attack because you precipitated it by failing in the first attack. So there's consequences. But, that's it. So 5% of your encounters are easy. And that's using little or no resources. You could get through them without using any limited resource. That's fine. But generally, it's going to use 5 to 10% of your resources. Then you have your medium encounters or moderate encounters. And those are the ones of approximately equal challenge rating to maybe +1 challenge rating of the party. Depending, the higher your party gets, the more flexibility you have to go up a challenge rating and still be considered kind of a medium encounter. And medium encounters use, 20 to maybe 50% of your resources. You could use more if you waste them. And that's where a lot of people went wrong, because they used less encounters in a day. So parties would just blow all their resources in every encounter, and it made the encounters much easier. That's why a lot of people said, oh, you can't die in 4th edition or whatever, because people would come into an encounter, blow all their dailies, blow all their encounters, beat the encounter out of hand and say, okay, we're doing a long rest. Well, you just did a long rest. Yeah, we're doing another one. You can really only do a long rest once in a 24-hour period. And if you use the gritty rules in 5th edition, you can even make a long rest only once a week. And so that means that you have to fit in these other encounters. So you can't always blow all your stuff all at once. You can't blow your entire payload and say, okay, we're good. Oh, wait, Godzilla didn't come alone. Look, there's somebody else. Now we're screwed because we have no abilities left. And so use of resources is the big thing that you look at in these scenarios. And that's the thing. And then, so that was your medium encounters. Then there's the more tricky one, which is the hard encounters. We're not into the deadly or boss encounters yet, but the hard encounters, and they take up about 30% of your daily encounters. These are encounters that are about 2 to 3 challenge ratings above the party. Maybe only 1 above the party, depending on how close you are to lower levels. Because a 2nd level challenge is a lot more to a 1st level party than like a 6th level challenge is to a 5th level party. So there's a little leeway there. So that might just be a hard encounter. But 30% of those are hard, but they're not always hard because of what you think. 15% of that, so half of that So 50% of that 30%, so 15% of the overall day is just straight hard encounters. Their challenge rating of up to maybe 3 above the party, at most 3. Um, and they're just that difficult. They're going to use between 50 and 75% of your resources. So, and they have the risk of using even more, turning them into more like of a deadly encounter, depending on how many resources, first off, that you already used in the day. If you come up against this hard encounter after having 2 or 3 medium encounters, so your resources have already been depleted by quite a bit, the hard encounter becomes deadly because you don't have the resources left to handle it. And that's where the fiddling comes in. The other 15%, the other 50% of hard encounters, the other 15% of your daily encounters are tricky encounters. Tricky encounters means that they may be deadly unless you find out the trick behind the encounter. Say the encounter is with lycanthropes, and until you figure out that you need silver or magic to attack them, everybody who's attacking them with regular weapons is just wasting their attacks. And so they're going to keep healing that damage that's really going to be negligible to them. Or same thing with a troll. A troll is regenerating. Until you're hitting that troll with fire or acid, the troll is just going to keep healing things faster than you can hurt him for the most part, unless you're rolling all crits. And so that's next to an impossible encounter for your party until you figure out that one trick to bypass it. Other tricks could be, there might be something situated in the environment that you learn, like there might be one massive monster that most of you can't hit except with mostly 19s and 20s on your die rolls, but between powers that use saving throws instead of a direct hits, and maybe causing the ceiling to collapse over him, which is set up in the stage setting, you are meant to beat him that other way, and that's a tricky encounter. And like I said, tricky encounters fall under the hard category because until you figure out the trick, the encounter can be more in the deadly environment. And like I said, 50 to 75% of your resources or more could be used in that hard encounter. Then finally, there's 5% left in the day. Okay, because we've done this, and actually the easy encounters were 15%, not 5%. So 3 out of 5. So I don't know why I made that mistake. It's not 5% easy, it's 15% easy. 15% easy, 50% moderate, that's 65. Then 30% hard, that's 95, and you have 5% left. And the 5% is your deadly encounters, also known in video game parlances as your boss or mini boss encounters. These are the encounters that are +4 to +5 or above. Really, you don't want to go much more than +5 unless you mean them not to attack it at this time. You mean them to go back, lick their wounds, and come back stronger. And that's because once they get past 5 CRs above, in most of the CR system editions of D&D, it becomes impossible to hit the creatures without a critical hit in many cases because their armor classes and stuff are so high, and it becomes impossible for the monster to miss your characters in the same situations because their 2 hits are so high, they have to fumble to miss you. So if everything becomes a battle of crits and fumbles, it's deadly. So it's way more than deadly. So boss encounters, though, are that last 5%. These are going to be creative. You want them to be creative. This is going to be tricky because you want the boss to be tricky. This is going to involve some dialogue. A boss encounter is nice if the guy starts with an evil monologue, because that's kind of what you expect from the big boss battle. You expect him to come and says, "Aha, you new adventures! I knew I would be facing you." Blah blah blah, and you go and you get to act the thespian for a while. And you have to realize and make sure that it's telegraphed to your players that 5% of encounters that are the boss and mini boss encounters, it is even more encouraged to run away, especially if you don't get to attack them fresh. If you're coming to the boss encounter after even one easy encounter, you still might have used up too many resources, because guess what? The percentage of uses of resources of that 5% is 100 plus. technically it's 75% or above, but it's really 100 plus. You could use up all your resources, or you could use more than your resources. In other words, you die, or you end up kind of borrowing resources, and then the DM has to give you extra resources somehow. You have to dig into those resources that don't count into your normal daily resources, things like temporary potions that you don't always use. You know, they're very limited, is then they don't refresh at the end of the day. Those are extreme resources that you're supposed to, like, you know, buy. Like your healing potions you buy, you're not expecting to use 4 or 5 healing potions every day, because then your healing potion budget goes out the roof. Your accountant yells at you. The wife says she's leaving you because you're spending too much money on healing potions. That's the kind of thing. I like to inject a little bit of humor in this. We've actually gone over the 2 hours for the chat. We still never got a set topic, but we got to talk about some great things in D&D, things that DMs are often handling. We did keep, it looks like, 2 viewers through most of this, so that was helpful. I would have rather it averaged at least 3 just to keep my average up, but that's understandable. I'm still building this show, but tell your friends about it. If you enjoyed any part of the show, let them know. If you didn't enjoy the show and there's something I could do to improve the show, let me know. And don't just tell me to stop talking, because unfortunately that one's not going to work. My girlfriend's still trying. Doesn't work. Nah, she gave up. Telling me to stop talking, it doesn't work.
I learned way too early.
Yeah. She learned way too early, she said.
But
So,
you should if you wanted to go from 6 to 8.
yeah. But yeah, that's what I was just telling him that. She was telling me at the time too, because I think she's tired of being quiet. She wants to be able to make a little bit, or let the kid make a little bit more noise. And she might want to dig into dinner, and she'd like me to check it and see if it's all ready. She's probably getting a little on the hungry side now. So we're going to go off and eat dinner. I do want to thank my 2 viewers who have been here. I'm going to go ahead and set the channel to raid another channel when I'm gone, so it'll automatically redirect you. Looks like on my raid list right now is Captain Robert's. Oftentimes, if he's not live, he's running a rerun on his channel, so there's always kind of something going on there. And he does like Saved by the Spell D&D campaigns. So I'm going to send you over there. Sometimes I'll send you to other people streaming games like Fractured or Final Fantasy X, or I'll send you to like Penny Arcade or D&D Beyond or Dungeons and Dragons' channel just to check. I've got those set as like kind of auto host. So if he gets offline, if Captain Robert gets offline and they happen to be online, it might automatically switch to them and redirect you again. Or you might go to wherever their redirect is set to. I'm not sure absolutely how that works. I'm, like I said, still a new streamer. But I'm going to start the raid on that and go ahead and log off myself. So thank you so much and have a great evening, and keep playing. May all your dice rolls be